Kyle Seraphin is here. He's a former FBI agent, host of the Kyle Seraphin Podcast. Kyle, good to have you back with us, sir.
Hey, Vince, thanks for having me back on. Good to
Well,
talk to you.
I think Andy McCabe really captured it for me. It makes me want Kash Patel desperately to be FBI director.
Yeah, from his mouth to God's ears, right? That sounds great. I think other people that Andy McCabe would really like is a John Brennan type, or maybe a James Clapper, like, people that are just totally enmeshed in the corruption. So,
yes,
pretty amazing. Listen, Andy McCabe is a petty person. He was not particularly well thought of, and he's not particularly well thought of by people that actually serve the FBI's mission, not the political purpose that it's gone to, but the real FBI folks that are out there that are decent people that are out there catching bad guys and sending me pictures of shotguns and saying, can you identify this? We're writing a search warrant for a fentanyl dealer. Those guys who are still my friends and still do the work in places that work needs to be done.
Yeah,
they don't want anything to do with an Andy McCabe choice. Andy McCabe worked into his settlement that the FBI had to give him the SES, the Senior Executive Service cufflinks that go along with resigning and retiring from the FBI. That's the kind of guy. He needs to have it on his cufflinks so he can go and do his CNN and his MSNBC hits. So, I think it's a perfect endorsement. And Kash Patel, I'm a cash-only guy. That's what I have to say about that. He's the right dude for the job because he scares the hell out of him.
One of the things that I heard Andy McCabe say in that audio about Mike Rogers, he was saying, oh, he was on the House Intel Committee, and he was basically a very kind of loyal guy to the FBI as it existed. And he also said that he'll be really good at keeping secrets from the American people. It sounds to me like Andy McCabe loves Mike Rogers because he's controlled.
Mike Rogers would be a status quo pick. Now, we saw the Trump transition folks come out and say that they haven't had any talks about him. From the people that are kind of the sources that I have orbiting around that area, it doesn't sound like he's a pick that they're really interested in. I hope Donald Trump knows better. Well, I suspect that he does.
Let me add some definition to what you just said. Dan Scavino came out with a tweet this morning that said definitively, he said, I just spoke to President Trump regarding Mike Rogers going to the FBI. It's not happening. In his own words, quote, I have never even given it a thought. Dan, once again, says not happening. So to offer people a sigh of relief here, Mike Rogers is not going to become the FBI director.
That's my instinct. Look, it looked from the outset, for those of us that keep an eye on kind of the wildness of social media, particularly the Twitter first and all that, it looked like people on X were floating out an opinion that may have originated at Fox. And it does seem like the status quo choice. That's why an Andy McCabe would get behind it. It would be the status quo move to put a guy who worked in the FBI from 1989 to 1994 and has about as much familiarity with the FBI as someone who works in the DMV in Dallas, Texas. It's just not a familiarity. It was 30 years ago. It's completely irrelevant. If you want to be relevant to the FBI and understand the problem, you have to be a post 9/11 FBI employee at the very minimum, or have familiarity with that sort of animal, and probably a post Obama era, which means Kash is a great example. He's worked in a bunch of different leadership things. If anyone Googles his name and sees what his bio looks like on the DOD's website, He's got all kinds of senior level experience. And he's a really good person. He's a really mellow, down to earth, and he's willing to be like wrong about things and learn, but he's also willing to just say honest and common sense things. And of course, he's written a book on government gangsters.
Well, he's battle tested is the key. And he worked, I mentioned the House Intel Committee and how unfortunately in the case of most congressmen who serve on it, they end up becoming captured by the Intel community rather than overseeing them. That wasn't the case for Kash's boss, Devin Nunes. Devin Nunes stood out as somebody who really was delivering scrutiny to the Intel community, and Kash Patel stood arm in arm with him and did that very thing. So that suggests that when the going gets tough, Kash Patel gets going. He's the right guy for this world.
Well, let me add a little bit of color to that too, because when my story went public and I first spoke to Dan Bongino, which was in September of 2022, we didn't have any idea what we were going to do next. My family was without a home; we had to sell it. And Kash picked up the phone and called me. I'd never spoken to him before. I didn't really know who he was other than I'm familiar with sort of the name. And he said, I want to help you, and I want to send you a check. I have a foundation that supports people that do the right thing, that are getting targeted by the government because I've gone through it. And I said, look, there's people that got to need it more than me. And he said, that may be, but I want to give it to you, and I want to help you out, and I want you to recommend people that I can help. And he helped out my friend Garrett O'Boyle, who people have seen testify in front of Congress. He helped out my friend Steve Friend. These are like no strings. Let me just send you some money because it's Christmas and you got to have, presents under the tree for your kids.
Yeah.
He worked with Marcus Allen. He reached out to people. And when I said, what can I do to help you? What do you need from me? And he said, nothing. And I said, do you want me to come on a podcast? Do you want me to talk? Do you want me to, give an interview? And he goes, no, we can do all those things too. This has nothing to do with that. You're just a guy who did the right thing. We want to support you. So he's got the Fight with Kash Foundation. They just literally go out and say, we want to help people who have been targeted by the government. And he's never once gone out there and bragged about it or told people that I'm aware of, hey, look at all the good things I do. That's the kind of person I want, somebody who actually understands kind of like American values, that we pick up people that did the right thing.
Well, to give you a sense of how right you are, that's the first time I've heard that story. So
of
this
course,
is
and I haven't told it to people because he told me not to tell people because it wasn't what it was about, and now he's in this running, and you see people all over the place. Like I said, social media is pretty big on it. It seems like there's enough big voices. Charlie Kirk just said it as well.
Yeah,
folks are out there recognizing he's just been the kind of guy that when you see him in a hotel lobby, which I did when I went to Turning Point's event in 2022, he bought me a Coors Light. He's not a fancy pants guy. He wears a T-shirt where he goes. This is the kind of thing that would be completely the opposite of a Chris Wray who flies everywhere in a $60 million jet and wants to be treated like royalty and has a big protective detail and flies to his multiple houses and, has a house in D.C. and has a house down in Georgia and this kind of thing. He's just a different kind of guy. He's gone to bat for the American people, whether they knew it or not. And I love him. He's just a great dude.
It's also telling that he came to you at a time where it wasn't like the coast was clear for everybody to be on your side. It's like it's.
I had.
It's really telling.
Told me I was too hot.
Yeah, you can measure people in D.C. based on when they respond. Sometimes people wait for the water to be good before they dive in. And Kash is kind of like President Trump, actually, is one of these guys who will just say it early and stick to it because he truly believes in it. The consequences be damned.
I 100% agree with that. Like I said, there are people that have told me that you're too politically hot. The things you say are too aggressive. The plans that you're advocating for are too much. And the difference is when I said those things to Kash, he listened and said, okay, what's the pushback against that somebody might lobby? And I'd say, it would be this. And he said, how do you defend against that argument? And I said this. And he said, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Yeah. So he's a person that's listened to people that have been inside the Bureau recently. He comes from the outside, which would be very good. And, he's been loyal to sort of, he's not even that political in my experience. He may say things that sound political, but they just sound reasonable if you go back 20 or 30 years. That's the way that people used to talk. It's really refreshing. And
the reason it sounds political is because he's countering all of the political abuses that the left has meted out using these institutions. So when you speak up for it, it makes you sound like you're some like raving right winger. He's just arguing for normalcy. That's been the entire argument that I've heard and talked to Kash Patel about for years. So if he does arrive as the director of the FBI, and of course there's a lot of ifs here, President Trump may go with somebody else. What kind of change do you envision him affecting?
Well, Andy McCabe actually did say something important, which is that the deputy director is a really big, important thing. There are a couple of people that should be considered for that position, and I'll talk about them privately. They don't need to have their name dragged out. But those types of people that me and some of my buddies have sort of recommended, long-term FBI folks that understand deeply what is wrong and have fought against it internally and externally. I think most of the SES would look for ways out. They'd be looking for parachutes immediately. We're already being told that there's a sort of a plan in place to how to protect Chris Wray until he gets home so he doesn't have to catch a commercial flight, because I think he obviously sees the writing on the wall as well. So the security detail that works underneath the FBI director is making a contingency plan to pick up a new director and drop the old director off. So all of these things are going right now. The question is how much of the people that are in the, say, GS-15 all the way up to the top of the SES will want to stick around and see if they can survive. And if you do get a guy like Kash Patel, most of them will realize that their days are numbered. They're all going to be asked the right questions, which is that, are you loyal to the Constitution? And have you done the right thing? And hopefully you see somebody that actually can recommend some prosecutions. We know we got Pam Bondi in there right now. It'd be nice to see some of these folks who have done some real conspiracies against rights, which is what they charged Donald Trump with. I would like to see that turned around on some of the folks that have legitimately, multiple individuals got together and conspired against the rights of both the American people and some specific individuals. And let's see some consequences. I think that's what Americans are here for. A lot of these other things, it's very exciting to see, different picks that turn the left's head inside out. Yeah. At the end of the day, if you're going to correct the single biggest wrong, it is that we have a rogue Justice Department and we have an incredibly dangerous FBI that does have a few good deep, apples in it, and they've been doing the work the whole time. We've got a lot of corrupt management that needs to be rooted out by culture, and that's going to start from the top.
Kyle Seraphin, lastly, and on a slightly different topic, but the same department. This week we saw that Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, as well as FBI Director Chris Wray, refused to show up to their oversight hearing at the Senate Homeland Security Committee. yesterday. That's making even the Democrats on that committee upset. Gary Peters, Democrat of Michigan senator, says it's a, quote, shocking departure from tradition. Why do you think, if you have a speculation on this, why would Chris Wray not show up for congressional testimony right now?
I think that what has gone on in the last 3 weeks in this country has been a sea change, and I'll be the first to admit that I didn't even know that we were going to have an election, and I'm glad to be wrong about it. I think that the popular mandate that's come down, whether or not the count continues on in places like Chicago, at the end of the day, something very definitive happened, and Americans said what they will and will not tolerate. And the people that have been doing things like thumbing their nose at oversight and at the American people's ability to learn what they're doing, those people are now suddenly on the defensive for the first time. I've got a lawsuit that's been going on against the FBI in the FOIA sphere where we've tried to get a copy of a presentation that was done a year ago, November, that was the FBI Office of General Counsel making fun of Republicans in Congress for investigating them because they have out and out and outright been just lampooning the folks that were trying to do the constitutionally required job of oversight. And now what you're seeing is not only are they going to be, they're going to be thumbing their nose, they're actually starting to realize like there may be some real consequences and I don't need to be caught in the perjury trap. And there may be an appetite to actually come after us for the lies. There's no question in my mind that if they were not complete lies, they were half-truths that have been said for the last 4 years by these guys. And they're probably starting to try to figure out what their exit strategy looks like. That's my guess. And they need to spend all their time on that instead of sitting in front of the hill.
All right. Kyle Seraphin, former FBI agent, host of the Kyle Seraphin Podcast. Thank you, sir. As always, good to talk to you today.
Thanks, Vince.
All right. Be well.